For millions of people, ABBA was the sound of pure joy. They were a pop phenomenon, a supernova of musical perfection that basically defined an era. With their glittery costumes, catchy melodies, and the image of two happy couples in love, they were selling a fantasy that felt as real as their hits. They were Agnetha, Björn, Benny, and Annie-Frid, a name that became shorthand for happiness itself. But for decades, fans have sensed something else there, just beneath the surface. A deep, almost secret sadness woven into their later, most powerful songs. It was a feeling, a suspicion, a quiet theory whispered among the most devoted listeners. That the smiles were part of the performance and the real story was one of heartbreak. Now, at 78, Benny Andersson, the quiet genius at the piano and the architect of ABBA's sound, is finally confirming what we've thought all along. In a series of startlingly candid reflections, he's pulled back the curtain on the emotional exhaustion and personal pain that quietly ended one of music's greatest reigns. This isn't a story about big scandals or bitter feuds. It's something far more human, and because of that, far more devastating. This isn't just the story of how ABBA broke up. It's the story of how they broke down. To understand the fall, you first have to understand the fairy tale. Before they were global superstars, they were just four incredibly talented musicians, drawn together by luck and by song. You can't tell the story of ABBA without first telling the story of the two love affairs that gave the group its soul. It all started back in the mid-1960s on Sweden's vibrant music scene. Two ambitious young men were making names for themselves. Grandbror Benny Andersson was a prodigy. Born in Stockholm, he was surrounded by music from age 6, learning accordion from his dad and grandpa and soaking up Swedish folk tunes that would later become a secret ingredient in his songwriting. By his teens, he'd taught himself piano and was the keyboardist for the Hepstars, one of Sweden's biggest pop bands. Meanwhile, Björn Ulvaeus, a bright and thoughtful guitarist, was the frontman for the Hootenanny Singers, a popular folk group. Their paths crossed in 1966, and they felt an immediate musical connection. They started writing songs together, a partnership that would soon change pop history. But music wasn't the only thing in the air. During the 1969 contest to pick Sweden's Eurovision entry, Benny met a captivating singer with a rich, mezzo-soprano voice named Annie-Frid Lyngsted, who everyone knew as Frida, born in Norway but raised in Sweden. Frida had a magnetic stage presence and a deep, soulful voice. The connection was instant, and they soon became a couple. Around the same time, Björn's life changed when he met Agnetha Foltskog on a TV show. Agnetha was already a successful solo artist, a blonde soprano with a voice that was both pure as crystal and heartbreakingly vulnerable. She and Björn fell deeply in love and got married in 1971. So now, you have two couples, four friends, all tangled up personally and professionally. At first, they just helped out on each other's solo projects, but the chemistry between the four of them was just undeniable. Blending Agnetha's and Frida's voices was pure magic, a powerful, angelic sound that would become their signature. Paired with Benny's melodic genius and Björn's sharp, lyrical storytelling, the potential was limitless. They named their group ABBA, an acronym of their first names. And in a world where managers told bands to hide their relationships, ABBA did the opposite. Being two married couples wasn't a problem, it was their brand. They projected this image of wholesome, happy, domestic bliss. In 1974, they took their shot at global fame at the Eurovision Song Contest. Dressed in flamboyant, silver-buckled satin, they performed a song that was bright, bombastic, and impossibly catchy. That song was Waterloo, and it was their arrival. They won, and that victory launched them onto the world stage. ABBA Mania had officially begun. The world didn't just fall in love with the music, they fell in love with the story. For a while, the image and the reality were the same. They were on top of the world, building a kingdom of sound on a foundation of genuine love. But no kingdom, especially one under the constant spotlight of fame, is safe from the cracks that start to form from within. The years after Waterloo were a dizzying, non-stop whirlwind. ABBA went from Eurovision winners to a global machine, a pop culture phenomenon like the world had rarely seen. Their success wasn't a fluke. It was the result of relentless, meticulous work. Benny and Björn were a two-man hit factory, famous for their perfectionism, spending endless hours layering harmonies and polishing melodies. Benny, the quiet craftsman, was the soul of the music, later revealing that his roots in Swedish folk and classical music were the bedrock of ABBA's sound, giving their songs those melancholic undertones that set them apart from disposable pop. The hits just kept coming. SOS, Mamma Mia, Fernando, Dancing Queen. Dancing Queen became a global anthem, a song that defined pure joy. On stage, they were the picture of harmony. Agnetha and Frida became fashion icons with their radiant smiles and choreographed moves. Benny was the stoic maestro at his piano, and Björn was the energetic guitarist. Together they projected an aura of four friends living a shared dream, but as their fame exploded, so did the cracks in their personal lives. The ABBA machine needed constant fuel. The cycle of recording, promoting, and touring was grueling. The pressure to keep up their perfect public image was immense. They weren't just four people anymore. They were a brand, a multi-million-dollar corporation, and that pressure started to wear down their relationships, which were now being lived. Out under a microscope. For Agnetha especially, stardom was a heavy burden. She was a homebody who suffered from a crippling fear of flying, which made touring an agonizing experience. On top of that, she was a mother to two young children with Björn, and she felt immense guilt being away from them for so long. She later confessed to feeling mangled by the conflict between being a pop star and a mom. The fantasy of being a happy family on the road was just that, a fantasy. The reality was exhaustion and growing distance. Benny recently admitted that. Even at their peak, the happy-go-lucky image was mostly for the fans and to protect the empire they'd built. He confessed there were nights the atmosphere backstage was so icy they'd barely speak to one another before stepping on stage to sing about love and joy. He described it as a quiet sadness that seeped into everything. They weren't fighting or yelling. They were just fading, politely and professionally drifting apart, which made it all the more heartbreaking. Benny would later reflect that he often felt a step removed from the spotlight. The craftsman behind the glass building the cathedral of sound, but not the icon people came to see. This perspective perhaps gave him a unique view of the group's slow unraveling. The machine they had built was becoming too powerful to control. The pressure to be perfect, to keep smiling, was creating an environment where real human connection started to die. The two couples at the heart of the group were now four individuals, isolated by the very success they had built together. The fairy tale was crumbling. The end of the 1970s marked a turning point. That quiet sadness Benny described had become an unavoidable reality. The first pillar of the ABBA myth crumbled in 1979 when Björn and Agnetha announced their divorce. Publicly, they tried to spin it, calling it a happy divorce and insisting it wouldn't affect the band. It was a brave face, but behind the scenes, the pain was profound. Agnetha later confessed how devastating the split really was. That happy divorce story was a fiction created to protect the brand. She revealed she'd gone through a deep depression and needed counseling to cope. The pain was only made worse when, just a week after their separation, Björn was seen with a new woman. For Agnetha, having to stand on stage next to her ex-husband, singing songs that he wrote, became an act of almost unbearable strength. The illusion of ABBA as one big happy family was shattered for a while. They funneled this new, complicated reality into their music. The 1980 album Super Trooper featured one of their most iconic and heartbreaking songs, The Winner Takes It All. It was a raw, gut-wrenching ballad about the end of a love affair, sung with breathtaking anguish by Agnetha. The world immediately saw it as a direct reflection of her and Björn's divorce, with devastatingly specific lyrics like, "Tell me, does she kiss like I used to kiss you?" For his part, Björn has always maintained the song isn't a literal diary entry, but a fictional story about divorce he wrote one night with the help of a bottle of brandy. But for Agnetha, the line between fiction and reality was blurry at best. She later said, "Björn wrote it about us after the breakdown of our marriage. The fact he wrote it exactly when we divorced is touching, really. I didn't mind. It was fantastic to do that song because I could put in such feeling." The second pillar fell just 2 years later. The strain had shifted to Benny and Frida. Their relationship was passionate and intense, but Benny's obsession with his work created a growing distance. In recent interviews, he's spoken with a new honesty about this time, describing how he'd lose himself in the music to avoid confronting difficult emotions. "Music was my escape," he admitted. "I didn't know how to talk about pain, so I composed it instead." The final blow came in early 1981 when Benny told Frida he had fallen in love with another woman. They divorced that year, quietly and respectfully, but the emotional fabric of the band was now in tatters. With both couples broken, the very foundation of the ABBA story was gone. They were 4 individuals bound together by a contract and a shared history, navigating the wreckage of their personal lives in the public eye. Benny has since been blunt about this period, confirming that the emotional fallout made it increasingly difficult to continue. The joy was gone. What had once been a passionate collaboration had devolved into a job they felt obligated to do. The unraveling was complete. They say great art comes from great pain. And in ABBA's final years, that was proven with devastating clarity. As their personal worlds fell apart, their music changed. The sunny, bubbly pop of their early years gave way to a sound that was darker, more reflective, and soaked in a melancholy you could feel. If their rise was a fairy tale, their decline was chronicled in their songs. Benny Andersson's recent confirmation that their music wasn't just crafted, but were confessions in melody has finally given a name to what fans have felt for decades. The sadness wasn't just art. It was real. The most powerful example is still "The Winner Takes It All." Agnetha's performance is a masterclass in vulnerability. When you hear her voice crack with sorrow as she sings Björn's lyrics, you feel like you're a direct witness to her pain. But the sadness wasn't in just one song. Their final studio album, 1981's The Visitors, is a stunningly bleak and beautiful record haunted by the ghosts of their fractured relationships. It sounds icy, introspective, and almost claustrophobic, the sound of 4 people in a room together, but emotionally miles apart. Songs like "When All Is Said and Done," sung by Frida, directly confront the end of a relationship with a somber, mature resignation, serving as a direct parallel to the end of her own marriage to Benny. It's a song about looking back with sadness and acceptance, the sound of a chapter closing. Benny himself later admitted that the music was starting to feel unnatural, a reflection of the forced nature of their work at that point. Perhaps the most revealing tracks came at the very end. "Slipping Through My Fingers," a song about a mother watching her daughter grow up, was written by Björn about his and Agnetha's daughter. For Agnetha, singing it must have been gut-wrenching, touching on her deepest anxieties about missing her children's lives because of her career. Even more haunting is one of their final recordings from 1982, "The Day Before You Came." Sung by Agnetha in a stark, detached monotone, it tells the story of a boring life before a new love arrives. But the music, composed by Benny, is filled with a sense of dread. Many have interpreted it not as a love song, but as a song about death. Benny's recent confessions about feeling emotionally drained and uninspired give this idea a powerful new weight. It sounds like the work of a man for whom the joy of creation had simply vanished. Their very last recording, "Under Attack," is a frantic, paranoid track that feels like a panic attack set to music, a chilling reflection of how they must have felt, trapped by their own legacy. Unlike so many supergroups who implode in a blaze of public fights and lawsuits, ABBA didn't end with a bang. There was no farewell tour, no dramatic press conference. Instead, they just faded away. After a final TV appearance in December 1982, the group went on what they called a temporary break. The world waited and waited, but the break became permanent. For decades, a cloud of mystery hung over their silent breakup. Why did they just stop? Benny Andersson's recent candid admissions have finally given us the answer. He laid the truth bare with startling simplicity. We were exhausted. It wasn't one thing, but a slow, creeping burnout. The marriages were crumbling, the music was losing its spark, and they were all just too tired to fake it anymore, he explained. That one line, too tired to fake it, is perhaps the most honest and devastating explanation there is. It reframes the end of ABBA not as a failure, but as an act of self-preservation, the emotional toll of keeping up the happy ABBA facade while their private lives were in ruins had become too much. The joy that had once powered their creativity had been replaced by a sense of duty. Benny confessed that in the final years, he stayed in the band out of a feeling of responsibility to the fans, to the global machine they'd built. But trying to hold it all together was, in his words, simply not sustainable anymore. This emotional collapse was paired with a creative one. The magic between Benny and Björn in the studio had started to dry up. Benny described a moment of painful clarity during a late recording session. He'd crafted a technically perfect piece of music, but when he played it back, he looked around and realized no one was smiling. There was no joy in it. In that moment, he knew it was over. So they stopped. They chose silence over pretending. They walked away to protect what was left of themselves and, just as importantly, to protect the legacy of what ABBA had been. In his recent interviews, Benny speaks about this without any bitterness. He doesn't blame anyone. He sees the end as something inevitable, the natural conclusion for a beautiful machine that had simply run its course. We had done what we could do, he stated. There was nothing left in us to give. It's the closure that, for decades, fans never knew they needed. For years after their silent break, the members of ABBA went their separate ways. The world, however, never let them go. The 1990s saw a massive ABBA revival, thanks to the compilation album ABBA Gold, which became a colossal bestseller. Then came Mamma Mia! The stage musical that became a global phenomenon and 2 blockbuster films, introducing their music to a whole new generation. Benny and Björn were deeply involved, carefully managing their legacy. Benny's astute handling of these projects, combined with his other work, has contributed to a fortune widely estimated to be around $230 million, despite their enduring popularity, and a rumored $1 billion offer to tour. All 4 members repeatedly said no. It seemed the book on ABBA performing together was closed for good. Then, in 2021, the impossible happened. ABBA announced they had reunited to record a new album, Voyage, their first in 40 years. With it came a revolutionary concert experience, featuring startlingly realistic digital avatars of their 1979 selves. The project has been a monumental success, with shows scheduled into 2026, but with this reunion came the final, definitive word from Benny. This wasn't a new beginning. It was, in his words, a way to close the story on our terms. He has made it clear that Voyage is the final chapter. A traditional reunion or any more live performances will never happen. We'd rather leave too soon than too late, he stated. A decision rooted in a desire to preserve ABBA's legacy without tarnishing it. At 78, Benny Andersson is a man at peace with his past but still full of creative energy. He remains incredibly active, touring and recording with his beloved 16-piece Benny Andersson's Orchestra, which plays music rooted in Swedish folk traditions. His decades-long partnership with Björn continues to thrive through theatrical projects that bring their music to new stages. His recent willingness to speak so openly about ABBA's painful end has provided a profound sense of closure for millions. He has replaced the mystery with humanity, the speculation with a sad, simple truth. The fairy tale of the 2 happy couples may have been a fleeting moment, but the legacy of the music they created out of both their joy and their sorrow is immortal. The story of ABBA is so much more than pop history. It's a deeply human drama about love, loss, fame, and the quiet pain that can hide behind the brightest spotlights. Benny Andersson's final confirmation has given us the missing piece of the puzzle, revealing that the melancholy we always sensed in the music wasn't an illusion. It was the sound of their survival. What is your favorite ABBA song? And does knowing the story behind it change the way you hear it? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the music that shaped our world. Thanks for watching.